Jacob then settled again in the land of Canaan where his father had lived. When Joseph was 17 years old, he would often tend to his father's flock with his half-brothers. But Joseph would go and report to his father about some of the bad things that his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than his other children, as Joseph was born to him in his old age. One day, Jacob gave Joseph a special gift. It was a beautiful robe. His brothers unfortunately hated him because of their father's partiality. They couldn't say a kind word to Joseph. Joseph had a dream one night and promptly reported the details to his brothers, which resulted in them hating him more. "Listen to this dream," he announced. "We were out in the fields tying up bundles of grain. My bundle stood up, then all your bundles gathered around and bowed low before it." His brothers then taunted, "So you are going to be our king, are you?" Joseph then had another dream and again told his brothers about it. He said, "Listen to this dream. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me." This time he had told his father as well, and his father rebuked him. "What do you mean?" his father asked. "Will your mother, brothers, and I actually come and bow before you?" While his brothers were being jealous, his father actually gave it some thought, wondering what it all meant. Not long after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are over at Shechem with the flocks. I'm going to send you to them." Joseph replied, "I am ready to go." Jacob then said, "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along, then come back and bring me word." Jacob then sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from his home in the valley of Hebron. As he arrived, a man noticed him wandering around the countryside. "What are you looking for?" he asked. Joseph replied, "For my brothers and their flocks. Have you seen them?" The man replied, "Yes, but they are no longer here. I heard them say that they were going to Dothan." So Joseph went off to Dothan and found his brothers there. Joseph's brothers saw him coming in the distance and they recognized him. They then made plans to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into a deep pit," they exclaimed. "We can tell our father that a wild animal has eaten him. Then we will see what will become of his dreams." Thankfully, Reuben came to Joseph's rescue and said, "Let's not kill him. Why should we shed his blood? Let's just throw him alive into this pit here. That way he will die without us having to touch him." Reuben was secretly planning to help Joseph escape so that he could bring him back to his father. Once Joseph arrived, they took his robe and threw him into the pit. This pit was normally used for water storage, but was empty at that moment. Just as they were about to sit down and eat, they noticed a caravan of camels coming toward them in the distance. It was a group of Ishmaelites, traders transporting spices, balm, and myrrh from Gilead to Egypt. "What can we gain by killing our brother? A guilty conscience, that would be. Let's sell Joseph to the Ishmaelite traders," said Judah to his brothers. "Let's not be responsible for his death. After all, he is our brother." His brothers agreed. As the traders came by, the brothers quickly pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver, and the Ishmaelite traders took off with Joseph to Egypt. Reuben returned sometime later to get Joseph out of the pit, only to discover that he was missing. Out of anguish and frustration, he tore his clothes. He then went back to his brothers and lamented, "What can I do now? The boy is gone." Joseph's brothers then killed a goat and dipped the robe in its blood, then took the beautiful robe to their father and asked him to identify it. "We found this in the field. It's Joseph's robe, isn't it?" they told him. At once, their father recognized it and said, "Yes, it is my son's robe. A wild animal has attacked and eaten him. Surely Joseph has been torn to pieces." Jacob then tore his clothes and put sackcloth on. For many days he mourned deeply for his son. His family tried to comfort him, but nothing helped. He would say, "I will die in mourning my son," and began weeping. Meanwhile in Egypt, poor Joseph was sold to Potiphar, who was an officer of Pharaoh, which is the king of Egypt. Potiphar was a captain of the palace guard. Judah left home around this time and moved to Adullam, where he visited a man named Hira. There he met a woman which was a Canaanite and the daughter of Shua. They got married and had a son named Judah's wife had another son a while later, and his name was Onan. She had a third son sometime later and named him Shelah. They were living in Kizab when Shelah was born. When the oldest son, was all grown up, Judah arranged his marriage to a young woman named Tamar. Was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Judah then told Er's brother Onan, "You must marry Tamar, as our law requires the brother of a man who has passed away to do so. Tamar's firstborn son will be your brother's heir." Onan, however, was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So whenever he would sleep with Tamar, he wouldn't allow her to fall pregnant. But the Lord considered it to be a wicked thing for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother. So the Lord took Onan's life too. Judah then told Tamar not to marry again and to return to her parents' house. She had to remain a widow until his youngest son Shelah was old enough to marry her. Judah, however, did not intend to do this, as he was afraid that he would lose another son the same way he lost his other two sons. So Tamar went back home to her parents. As time went by, Judah's wife passed away. When the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone had told Tamar that her father-in-law had left for sheep shearing. She was also aware that Shelah was all grown up, but they did not call her to come and marry him. She then changed out of widow clothing and disguised herself by covering up with a veil. She then sat beside the road at the entrance of Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. Judah had noticed her but thought she was a prostitute, as her face was covered with a veil. He then stopped and propositioned her to sleep with him, unknowing that she was his own daughter-in-law. Tamar then asked, "How much will you pay?" "I'll send you a goat from my flock," promised Judah. She then asked, "What pledge will you give me so I can be sure you will send it?" He inquired, "Well, what do you want?" "I want your identification seal, your card, and the walking stick you are carrying." Judah then gave her these items. She then fell pregnant after sleeping with him. She then went home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. Judah then asked Hira to give her the goat and get back his belongings, but Hira couldn't find her. He then asked the man who lived there if they knew where he could find her. They replied saying, "We have never had a prostitute here before." Hira then returned to give Judah the news of his findings. Judah then exclaimed, "Then let her keep the pledges. We tried our best to send her the goat. If we go back again, we will be the laughingstock of the village." Judah found out 3 months later that Tamar was pregnant due to prostitution. Judah then shouted, "Bring her out and burn her." As they were taking her out to kill her, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "The man who owns this identification seal and walking stick is the father of my child. Do you recognize them?" Judah then admitted they were his and said, "She is more in the right than I am, as I didn't keep my promise to her to let her marry my son Shelah." Judah never slept with Tamar again. In due season, Tamar's delivery arrived and she had twin boys. As they were being born, the one boy reached out his hand and the midwife tied a scarlet thread around his wrist, saying, "This one came out first." Then he drew back his hand and his brother was actually the first to be born. "What?" the midwife exclaimed. "How did you break out first?" He was then called Perez. Then the baby that had the scarlet thread on his wrist was born, and he was named Zerah.